Good morning to all of you. Yeah, this is about the case-based discussion we had for cellular adaptations, right? It was, all my faculty who shared the case scenarios and all that. So I have Dr. Meenakshi here. She's a good girl. She's wearing mask. I'm not wearing. Okay. So we'll have the first scenario given by her. Yeah. Can you read this scenario for our students, Meenakshi?
A 62-year-old man with a 40-year history of gastroesophageal reflux presented to the SSIMS and RC complaining of dysphagia. Endoscopy with biopsies were performed and the patient was told that he had a 3 cm segment of Barrett's esophagus, which is extending from 33 to 35 cm from the incisors. Surveillance endoscopy done later after the 2 years and biopsy was performed. From microscopy, we have given the pictures. Then from that, what are the relevant changes occurred in the epithelium? What is the prognosis of the same?
Yeah. So there are 3 pictures provided. Nice case, students have discussed this very well. No? A 62-year-old man, elderly man. So he's got a history, 40 years history of gastroesophageal reflux. So he presented to our OPD. His complaints were dysphagia. I think, initially when he was coming here, he had heartburn also. Yeah. That's what he was telling. Okay. Then endoscopy. Of course, our gastroenterologist has done an endoscopy thinking of some cause there because of dysphagia. Students very well discuss this. Maybe there is something obstructing or some changes in the mucosa. Okay. Patient was, endoscopic biopsy was done and the findings are given here. Yes. This they have seen and you have told them the findings also. So it is looking like erosion here. Yes. Yes. So then the biopsy. Histology they have learned and this is stratified squamous non-keratinizing epithelium. This is a normal esophageal mucosa. Yeah. So lower end also we expected this to be present, but this was what was present.
Yes.
Okay, this was initial, right?
Yeah, initial.
Initial picture.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So this they also said many of them discussed this as Barrett's esophagus.
Yes.
Yeah. So that is squamous to columnar epithelial metaplasia. Right. So Barrett's esophagus extending from given it. Then surveillance endoscopy. This was a biopsy which was done after
2 years.
2 years. Yeah. So now he is. This was a previous biopsy.
Previous biopsy.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So here, what are the changes that they could appreciate here?
Ma'am, here the Barrett's esophagus has been becoming the dysplastic epithelium.
Okay.
The architecture of the cells has become glandular and the nuclear features are showing the dysplastic.
Yeah. So similar glands, the same glands which are here are showing dysplastic changes. Okay. So this they had discussed it for dysplasia.
Dysplasia.
Yeah. So the discussion went on, it was nice and this was given for a small group discussion also. The students participated and they're all really knowledgeable now.
Yeah, yes.
Yes. Yes. So moving on to the second case. Yeah.
Yes, ma'am. The second case was the 50-year-old female presented with a mild vaginal discharge on and off since 1 month. She visits the gynecologist and the following tests were done. The first, when she came, the gynecologist did colposcopy performed and the smear was made, which was stained with the Papa-Nicolau stain. And we have provided the 3 pictures.
Correct.
And we asked to compare the findings in all this.
Very nice. So history is given here. She's a 55-year-old female. So postmenopausal.
Yes.
Anything that happens, even mild bleeding after menopause has to be viewed seriously. That is the cause to be found out. So they need to visit the gynecologist. Yeah. She had mild vaginal discharge. Yes, off and on. Yes. So gynecologist. Colposcopy. Students didn't know what was colposcopy.
Yeah.
So we showed them the picture also. We said colposcopy is a procedure where the cervix is visualized. Okay, for abnormalities. So we'll teach them in detail or give them more information about the acetowhite epithelium and application of toluidine blue later. Yeah. So colposcopy was done and smear made. So this is first we told them this is a pap stain and pap smear and pap stain. This is for screening test for cervical or early detection of cervical cancer. Now she has a problem. Yes. So figure A shows here the normal cervical epithelial cells. So this is stained by Papanicolaou stain. So Papanicolaou, he was the one who discovered this stain. So we will take up this session, cytology when we teach who was Papanicolaou and all that. They've just entered. So we want them to know the terminologies. Like metaplasia, dysplasia, all that cellular adaptation. So there are two types of cells here. Very obviously differentiated by the color of the cytoplasm. Look at the translucency, so nice. So these are superficial squamous cells, this is intermediate. Okay. So you ask them to compare this smear which was taken and stained from the patient who presented with this. So some students confuse this for hypertrophy. Yes. Because the cell size had increased. Good, they have observed. That observation is there. So variation in cell size is definitely increased. The nuclear size has increased. So high nuclear cytoplasmic ratio. See, dark nucleus, more chromatin there. Then they said it is dysplasia. Similarly, another smear showing, see, increased the crowding of the cells and variation in the nuclear size very well seen, and how it is changing. The normal epithelial cells are changing. So we wanted them to appreciate the morphological features of dysplasia here, and provided they correlate this with the clinical findings. Yeah, very nice. There was one cytology and one biopsy
of the same patient.
Yeah, fine. Yeah. So this is the same patient?
Yeah, yes ma'am. This is the same patient, and here later they, after the colposcopy and pap staining, this next the investigation they did that cervical biopsy.
Okay. So because pap stain we said cervical dysplasia
was there.
Rule out malignant. So she is 55-year-old female who presented with postmenopausal bleeding, mild vaginal discharge, same. Okay, cervical biopsy. And our students were very good. They picked up this epithelium.
Yeah,
they said stratified squamous non-keratinous. So in what way this biopsy is different? So they said increase in number of cells. Okay, hyperplastic epithelium. And look at these cells. I was just giving them an example. So see how you will be when you are sitting in a classroom.
Yeah.
No, there is an orderly arrangement. And how they are in a practical class. Though they may be in groups, they're slightly haphazardly arranged. So that was the analogy I was just telling them. So increased in number of cells, haphazard arrangement, then more chromatin, hyperchromatism. Yes, see, loss of glycogen. All these cells have glycogen. That's a normal cell. There is loss of glycogen. This is the basis for application of Lugol's iodine. So we'll tell them later, not confuse them with. Yeah, they're just 1 month, not even 1 month old with us. No? We'll tell them this. So now they have understood, that postmenopausal, with anything, abnormal discharge, vaginal discharge, bleeding, yes, there is a need to visit the gynecologist, and pathology could be in the cervix. Now we are concentrating, it could be in the uterus, endometrium, but here we are telling them in the cervix. So important thing is there could be dysplasia. Or this dysplasia, they all said what happens next, what could happen. They said it could progress to carcinoma, squamous cell. Yeah. So next is in situ carcinoma, then invasive carcinoma. Oh, that was nice.
Discussion.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Nice discussion, Meenakshi. So we'll proceed on to the next cases. So each group had all the lesions that were
Yes,
given, But here we have continuously discussed only the dysplastic or cases with dysplasia. Okay. Thank you,
Thank
Meenakshi.
you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll move on to the next cases. Okay, Disha, you had contributed few cases. Let us look at that. Yeah. This was a case contributed by Disha.
An 82-year-old male presented to the clinic. His family members noticed he had a decline in thinking ability, understanding, confusion, forgetfulness, and inability to recognize common things. So, what's the probable diagnosis in this case?
This is an example of. So, Disha has given a scenario where it is an elderly man, 82-year-old. Okay, so his family members have brought him there with all these complaints. We know what happens at as people become old, but this does not happen to everybody. Yes, so confusion, forgetfulness, inability, and all that. So now, what is the probable diagnosis? So this they have to think. What is a clinical diagnosis? So yeah. So depending on this, what do you want them to think of?
Depending on the age and all these symptoms. So, most common diagnosis what we can think of at this age is a neurodegenerative disorder, Alzheimer's. So, we can make a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. And so, can you see the picture below?
Yeah, so old age and all these changes. So there is a picture given. All of them can identify this. They did identify this picture. So this was for a comparison. This is the pathological brain provided here. For comparison, there is a normal brain. Yeah. So size of the brain is decreased. That is one. Of course, naturally the weight also being decreased. And they were all able to identify this sulci which are very widened. See, comparative. And the gyri which are thinned out. And anything else?
So totally the cortical atrophy is seen compared to the normal brain. So there is cortical atrophy.
So they all said, everybody, I think all the batches could identify this, and they said atrophic brain. Atrophic brain. Okay. So you made them define what is atrophy. This was already discussed in a small group discussion, and this was an example for atrophy. We'll move on to the next one.
A 32-year-old male has been treated for fracture of both bones of lower limb and was advised immobilization, that is bed rest. So there was progressive loss in the muscle mass of lower legs. So this is an example of what?
Yeah, I would have shown them, I would have given them this task of identify what has to identify what has happened. That is nice. So immobilization. So when we teach them about healing, we say that the injured or the fracture healing. Immobilization is one of the mode of therapy. Yes, for the bones to undergo reunion. Yeah. Progressive muscle. So here the cast is removed. Right? Yes. So there is progressive muscle mass, loss of muscle mass. Yeah. So what did the students answer for this?
They answered it as atrophy, disuse atrophy.
Yeah, disuse atrophy. Yeah, and even I think discussed it as physiotherapy following this, or during the plaster cast, how the limb which is not put into the cast, which has to be moved and all that. I think this discussion went on well. This is to show them the case scenario. Yeah.
Next case, A 50-year-old male presented to the clinic with chronic flank pain, oliguria and burning micturition. He has elevated serum urea and creatinine levels. So what is the probable diagnosis, and this is an example of what?
So he's an elderly male. He presents with chronic flank pain. So when asked about the flank pain, some people said kidney, also related to the kidney. Oliguria. So we asked them the normal amount of urine excreted, what is oliguria, and then burning micturition. Yes. Then they all knew biochemistry. They've learned about the normal urea creatinine levels. So urea creatinine levels, serum urea creatinine levels are increased. So they said some dysfunction of the kidney. Yeah. So we told them the end stage kidney disease, renal failure, where persistent elevation of urea creatinine is there. So pictures are provided.
So what is the picture showing? So there is a normal kidney which is bean shaped and almost red in color, and you can see the picture on the right side where almost it is reduced to half of the normal size, and the shape is maintained.
Yes.
So what this indicates, it is some chronic disease or chronic condition of the kidney where there is a functional loss of nephrons and tubules that has led to the shrunken kidneys.
Okay. So this is atrophic kidney. Okay. Then we discuss further as whether it is bilateral, unilateral, and only mentioning few causes. When there are paired organs are there, we should know whether atrophy is unilateral or bilateral. That is a pathology, whether it is unilateral or bilateral, affecting both the kidneys. Yes.
Coming on to the next case, a 45-year-old male suffered spinal cord injury in a road traffic accident. He is now paraplegic and there is progressive loss of muscle mass of both legs. This is an example of. So he has suffered a spinal cord injury in the road traffic accident and he is paraplegic. First, we have to know what is paraplegia. So there is loss of movement or the sensation of all the four limbs. So we have to, lower limbs. There is a loss of movement and sensation of both lower limbs. So he cannot move both the limbs. There is no movement in both the lower limbs. And there is progressive loss of muscle mass of both legs over a period of time. So what we can think of?
Yeah, this they identified it as atrophy, and they gave nice cause also for atrophy.
It is called as denervation atrophy.
Yeah, but what did they say? Neuropathic atrophy. Yeah. But they could relate, because you said spinal cord injury, and they knew the causes of atrophy. So one is denervation atrophy also. So that they could very nicely identify, correlate. The etiology with the pathology. Yeah.
A 3-year-old child is underweight with dry skin, brittle hair and severe loss of muscle mass and subcutaneous fat. What is the probable diagnosis? And this is an example of. Seeing the picture, I think all of them can easily.
Everybody made the diagnosis. They all said marasmus, but some people said protein energy malnutrition. So we'll teach them that later. But marasmus was one thing they said.
Yeah. In the picture, how nicely we can see how there is a loss of muscle mass as well as subcutaneous fat, and there is dry skin, and even the hair changes we can see there.
Very pathetic. And I told them not to disclose the individual's identity in the previous this thing. But this is so painful. So when we are there, we should see that nobody should, at least children who are around us should never suffer from this. So in the hostel, I keep telling students not to waste food. This affective domain also they should learn by, don't you think this is so painful looking at this child? So don't waste food is one thing. And please provide food to the needy. God has given everybody enough. If you don't have, cut. If you are eating 3 meals, cut on 1 meal and then provide. They should learn this. Yeah.
So this is an example of atrophy of both muscles and the fat due to less nutrition or inadequate nutrition.
Yeah, nice case, Disha.
I think this is a case of hypertrophy.
Okay, so we have discussed Dr. Disha's case. See, every case scenario, it is not just the knowledge domain that we are interested in teaching students. All the other domains like the psychomotor or affective. I probably add more of affective domain to whatever case it be, because that makes every human being the best, I feel. No, it is the heart. So if you are ruled by your heart, I say you are the best. Thank you, Disha. Okay, we'll move on to further cases which were contributed by Dr. Neeta. Yeah.
Okay. A 50-year-old male with blood pressure 160/90 since 2 years is not on treatment. Complaints of shortness of breath, chest pain, especially after activity, and increased heart rate. So what is the diagnosis of this condition?
Yeah. So very nicely given history here. Elderly male. So you have mentioned the blood pressures. Now they know what is the normal values, and now they call this as hypertension.
Yeah.
2 years not on treatment. Yeah. He has complaints like shortness of breath, chest pain and all. Now they are attending clinical postings, and this probably they can understand as angina pectoris. Yeah. So what do you want them to know based on the history? What is the diagnosis of the condition? And a specimen of heart is provided. So what is the pathology? That's also good, because they know how the normal heart looks and what is the deviation that they want to, you want them to observe here, and mention another cause for the same. Yeah, once they identify what is this, they have learnt about it, they should give more causes and how it is diagnosed. Yeah.
Okay. So diagnosis of this condition is nothing but you're seeing high blood pressure, isn't it? It is a case of systemic hypertension. And what is a pathology in the heart? So when you make a clinical diagnosis, you don't tell directly a pathological diagnosis, isn't it? First, a clinical diagnosis of systemic hypertension is made. And when you look at the heart, what is the pathology you observe in the heart? So what is the normal thickness of the left ventricle?
Yeah, the cut section here is showing the left ventricle. So they can see the muscle mass here, the left ventricular wall. So this thickness is important.
So normally it is about 2 to 2.5 centimeters. So anything above 2.5 centimeter, you tell it is hypertrophy. So left ventricular hypertrophy, you can see it is more than 2.5 centimeters. So you measure the thickness of the left ventricle about 1 centimeter below the atrioventricular junction. Okay. So here it is more than 2.5 centimeters.
So this you gave for them to identify left ventricular hypertrophy. So because the heart is pumping that extra pressure that has caused, and it is usually concentric hypertrophy of the left ventricle. The entire wall shows hypertrophy. Yeah, mention another cause for the same.
Yeah, it could be aortic stenosis.
Yeah, where students, most of them said aortic stenosis. So they have understood that the obstruction, wherever there is obstruction, so something has to pump more forceful contraction.
That results in hypertrophy.
Yeah, very nice. So we always, we were giving them like how forcefully the water gets through the pipe when they're watering the garden plants using hose pipe when they partially obstruct, and what happens. Yes. How do you diagnose the condition? So you want them to know about this.
Yeah. How do you diagnose? Is mainly ECG or echocardiogram.
Okay, just to get these two terminologies from them, investigatory medicine. Very nice.
Okay. So next case, it's a child, 4 months old baby with history of projectile vomiting, dehydration and weight loss. So what is the diagnosis of the condition?
Very nice. This I was telling them, it is not just vomiting, it is projectile vomiting, which is coming with some force. Again, that hose pipe watering, if water has to go with force or rush, then yeah.
So projectile vomiting, that history itself suggests that there may be some kind of obstruction.
Yes.
Sometimes it will be bilious also, and dehydration and weight loss because of repeated vomiting. So diagnosis of this condition is
Many students said achalasia cardia.
achalasia cardia, yeah. So achalasia cardia, there will be dysphagia, fine. There won't be vomiting.
Yeah. So this, the food has entered the stomach.
Yeah.
Okay. So then there is projectile vomiting. Otherwise, with achalasia cardia, the symptoms
doesn't
would be
get entered.
like food not entering. So difficulty
Difficulty in
to
swallowing.
swallow.
If it is an achalasia cardia, where there is esophageal neuronal damage in the esophagus. Okay, so the diagnosis of this condition here is pyloric stenosis. So there is a pyloric valve which is present in between the stomach and the intestine. Fine. So the after digestion of food in the stomach, it gets pushed into the duodenum. So whenever there is obstruction due to the hypertrophy of pyloric muscles, it results in that projectile vomiting. So you can see there is hypertrophy of this pyloric valve. The muscle thickness is increased.
Yeah, they can compare, starting from here, if this is normal, how there is hypertrophy. So what muscles undergo hypertrophy here? They all said smooth muscle. Now they know what is the type of muscle and where all it is distributed. This is a nice case. Yeah.
Okay. So next one, it's a picture of a 40-year-old athlete having huge biceps and calf muscles.
Yeah. So we are showing only calf muscles here.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So biceps are not shown here. So calf muscles you're seeing, they are very huge, isn't it? They're very prominent. So he is mostly a sports person who's a runner. Okay. So what is the cause for this condition? Is it physiological or pathological? So there is hypertrophy of this skeletal muscle because he constantly keeps running, and he also does some kind of exercises.
Yeah. So biceps is.
He's also working
out. A gym body, we said,
yes,
working in the gym.
Yes, correct. Yes. So he has to run, isn't it? So by running, what happens? The muscle is repeatedly getting activated and it is becoming hypertrophy.
Yeah, this they all knew the answer.
Yes.
They said skeletal muscle hypertrophy and physiological. And they could talk about that mechanism also, the pathogenesis also.
Okay. A 25-year-old male with history of nephrectomy on one side due to non-functioning kidney. So one of the kidney is removed due to non-functioning. So what is the change observed in contralateral kidney? And give another example for the same. So you can see, so this is a left side is a normal size of the kidney. What happens to the other kidney when one kidney is removed? There is hyperplasia and hypertrophy of nephrons in another kidney. Fine. That results in increase in size of the contralateral kidney.
Yeah.
So this is
said compensatory.
Yes, this is an example for compensatory hypertrophy.
Yeah.
As well as hyperplasia.
They were quite good enough, to pick up this change. They knew about.
You could make
this.
out. Yes, you were able to give an example also. Another example for it is adrenals. Whenever there is adrenalectomy on one side, the contralateral adrenals also shows similar hypertrophy and hyperplasia.
Yes. So jokingly we were telling so we can live with one kidney.
Right.
Yeah. And we can live without gallbladder. We can live without spleen. We can live without tonsils. We can live without appendix. And after one age, we can live without uterus also. There's so many organs easily available for us
Yes,
to be removed.
many organs, yeah.
Right. Yes. So one kidney. That's how the kidney transplant. People come forward for donating
kidneys.
the kidney. Yeah, we are completing your cases.
Yes.
They were the nice cases, contributed by Dr. Neeta. Maybe discussion we are slightly going away to get the attention of students, telling them something related to the topic also. Thank you, Dr. Neeta. Yeah, Dr. Balaji is here to present and discuss the case scenarios that he had contributed.
Hello everybody, good morning. So the case scenario which I am going to discuss now would be based on a 57-year-old obese woman was admitted to emergency with right upper quadrant pain and tenderness with positive Murphy's sign. On ultrasonography, we found out that the gallbladder was large and thin, the wall basically. And on gross appearance, the gallbladder had a few cholesterol stone, and the wall was thin. Microscopically, the normal simple columnar epithelium of the gallbladder was replaced by intestinal epithelium. And we asked students to identify the condition and define the same. And we had provided them with the two nice photographs of gallbladder mucosa. So
yeah, now you were telling them what is seen also. So students should identify. That would be nice. That would be a task for them, so that they learn to identify the microscopy. So it's a 57-year-old obese woman admitted to emergency in her upper quadrant. They all said this is something related to the gallbladder, right? Yeah, and USG, so ultrasonography, showed a large gallbladder, wall was thin, and there was a stone also. Probably this stone was in the cystic duct obstructing, causing obstruction. Yes. So microscopy you have shown. They identified the condition, right?
Yes, they identified the condition, and they could pick up the retort shaped goblet cells which are lining the mucosa cells, and they could compare with the left half of the picture with the right half.
Yeah,
and
so this is normal. Here these are the goblet cells. Yes.
And we had put up the inset for microphotograph was showing the entire villi, which was where the intestinal metaplasia could be very easily appreciated compared to the lower half of it. Upper half was showing a lot of goblet cells.
Fine. So the case scenario is there, and cholecystitis, they knew something about this. They all said fatty, fertile, fat, female, and all that. See, the early clinical exposure is really, helping students learn better how they correlate and all that. Yeah, I was asking them what the gallbladder contains. They said bile. What is the color of bile? I said greenish yellow and all that. But in this case, on opening the gallbladder, so what comes out? There is obstruction. Cholesterol stone is obstructing the cystic duct. So no entry of bile into the gallbladder. But these cells are the goblet cells. What do they secrete? They said mucin. How does mucin appear? Mucus, running nose. They all have seen. Mucin is, whitish in color. So these cells secrete that. That means the gallbladder is filled with this mucoid material. So it is getting distended, cannot be drained, and the wall is becoming thin. As something gets accumulated in a pouch, the wall becomes thinned out. Cut section releases, or we see whitish mucus. So old terminology, I was just telling them, it is called as white bile. We all laugh at it when we hear, but there is a mention of white bile. It is not bile, because the gallbladder contains mucoid material. It appears white, and old terminology they call it as white bile. So if given the etiology here for the type of metaplasia that is seen here. We'll move on to the next one.
Yes. So the next case scenario that we had given was of a 40-year-old male patient presenting to emergency with flank pain and hematuria since few hours. On ultrasonography, they found out a renal calculi was present, and on microscopy, renal pelvis, which is normally lined by transitional epithelium, was found to be replaced by stratified squamous epithelium. And we had provided a photomicrograph of the scene.
So flank pain, they all said, something related to the kidney. And this terminology they knew. What is hematuria, presence of blood in the urine. Then you have given the finding of ultrasonography. What was there? So renal calculi, but probably this is a large calculus which was there in the pelvis. So pelvis, the pelvic mucosa is showing adaptation here because of that chronic irritation. So transitional epithelium undergoing metaplasia to squamous epithelium, stratified squamous epithelium. Yes, so they identified the condition. They could appreciate the mucosa.
The difference
Then,
between
yeah, so the definition, all the batches, they could define the condition very well. So what next could happen to this? There's a dysplasia, then carcinoma in situ, and then squamous cell carcinoma. That's how squamous cell carcinoma can occur in the kidney, because normally there is no squamous epithelium in the kidney or urinary passages. This was a nice case.
The next case was of a 45-year-old male patient presenting with dyspepsia, dysphagia, and pain in epigastrium on eating food since 2 months. And endoscopic biopsy was done for the person, and on microscopy we found that the lower esophagus, which is usually lined by stratified squamous epithelium, was replaced by a columnar epithelium. The photomicrograph of the same was given for the students. We asked them to identify the condition.
So they identified this as stratified squamous epithelium replaced by
Columnar.
columnar epithelium. So they knew this terminology also, which was told to them as Barrett's esophagus. So next, when they learn about Barrett's esophagus, so they should be able to recall this and tell us what is the pathology that they see in Barrett's esophagus. Because similar case, we discussed one similar case for
Dysplasia.
dysplasia. Yes.
Another case scenario that we gave was of a 58-year-old multiparous female presenting with pelvic heaviness and something protruding from the vagina. A hysterectomy was performed on the person, and on microscopy we found out that normal columnar epithelial lining of the endocervix was replaced by a stratified squamous epithelium, and we had provided 2 photomicrographs for the same at the bottom, and we asked them to identify the condition.
Yeah. So there's something to learn from the history here. A case scenario: elderly, postmenopausal woman, multiparous. So that is repeated deliveries, causing prolapse of the uterus. So what was coming out of the vagina was the elongated hypertrophied cervix, right? So they know about this prolapse, and the group which is posted to OBG now, clinical postings. Hysterectomy, they know this is removal of the uterus, was performed, and we have told them what is gross macroscopy, what is microscopy. So we have observed the specimen that is removed and sent to us grossly for the abnormalities or changes, deviation from normal. Then microscopy, we take bits from different areas to make slides and study the pathology microscopically. So Dr. Balaji has very well given, told you also what is there. See, the endocervix is lined by columnar mucin secreting epithelium. See that regular arrangement of the nuclei here. So this is transformed to squamous epithelium. So there is another picture here. This is stratified squamous non-keratinizing epithelium. Keratin should have been there if this is really prolapse with chronic irritation. Then endocervical glands are here. And now they have learned something else more than metaplasia. I think the students, I request all the students to go back, see this slide again. Can they identify something here for the arrangement of the cells and all that? Can they put some other terminology here? Otherwise, a nice example for squamous metaplasia of the endocervix, a common pathology we keep seeing.
So another case scenario that we had given to our students was of a 45-year-old male patient with history of heavy smoking since 15 years. Came with complaints of fatigue, dry cough, and hemoptysis since 1 month. And under bronchoscopic biopsy was done for the patient, and on microscopy we found out that normal ciliated pseudostratified columnar epithelium of the bronchus was replaced by stratified squamous epithelium. And a photomicrograph for the same was provided for the
A
students.
very nice history. So 40-year-old male patient, history of heavy smoking, 15 years. So when did he start smoking then? At the age of 25 years.
Yes.
Now you see teenagers and even, children who start smoking. This is what probably they get from the society, from their people at home and all that. Yeah. And 40-year-old male patient. Now we are seeing females also as, heavy smokers. So we should know what is the adverse effect that results from smoking. There's something to learn from the history that is nicely given. And the dry cough, hemoptysis. This terminology they answered. They said blood in the sputum. Yeah, bronchoscopy to visualize. So pulmonologist knows that there's some pathology. So he has done bronchoscopy and sent us the bronchoscopic biopsy. Yeah.
And done by bronchoscopic biopsy on the left upper half of the photomicrograph, students could appreciate the pseudostratification of the columnar epithelium
and even the cilia.
seen in the cilia over there. And on the right upper half, they could see the stratified squamous epithelium slowly replacing the respiratory epithelium, and they identify the condition, and they could even define this particular condition. And they could even tell that, this kind of metaplasia, stratified squamous epithelium in comparison with the ciliated epithelium is much more tougher in handling irritation. That's why for longer the duration of smoking, longer the irritation, and the area of respiratory epithelium which is replaced by stratified squamous epithelium increases.
Yes. So this can further progress to dysplasia and then squamous cell carcinoma. Normally, squamous epithelium is not there in the respiratory passages. This is how. And another cause for squamous metaplasia is vitamin A deficiency. Now, they all should know that there is this in Anganwadi also, children are provided with vitamin A drops. It's become less common for us to see children with vitamin A deficiency. So these were the case scenarios provided by Dr. Balaji. See, the case scenarios help us not just to learn pathology, starting from etiology, symptoms, signs, investigations, then ultimately the pathology, either gross or micro, or combining gross and microscopy.
As Madam told, the case scenarios will help you to understand why pathology bridges between the clinical subject and the preclinical subjects. It helps you to understand how exactly the things are in clinical side, why certain symptoms and signs develop. So with that in mind, these case scenarios will be of great help. And
yeah, don't we see a change in our students, how they are learning from the previous curriculum? They really enjoy. Many students said, yeah, we are learning, learning is enjoyable. Thank you, Dr. Balaji.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have Dr. Srividya Lata. Let us see her case scenarios. Okay. Vidya, you can start now. Wait. So Dr. Vidya will be discussing the case scenarios that she has given all of you.
Hello everyone. So this is case number 14. A 74-year-old male patient presented with complaints of increased frequency of micturition, poor stream and staining since 1 year. There is urgency for last 6 months. However, there is no history of blood in urine, no history of trauma. On ultrasound, prostate was enlarged and the patient was subjected to transurethral resection of the prostate.
When the biopsy was received, the microscopy showed that the prostatic tissue had a proliferation of both glands and fibromuscular stroma. The glands were crowded in arrangement and they were all bilayered. So the questions are, what is your diagnosis? What is the underlying cellular adaptation?
See, again, Sri Vidya Latta is a very good teacher. So she has told the microscopic findings already, right? So I would have been different. I would have said you have seen prostate histology and in what way this differs from the histology. But anyway, good. We have not taught them this area. So he's an elderly male. So we need not expect them in the hospital with all these complaints, you know. So if you are have a grandfather or elderly, people with you, definitely they also would complain this after a particular age. So looking at the history, what she has given, frequency of micturition, poor stream and urgency. So all our students said it is something related to the bladder, they said, looking at the history given. Then no history of blood in the urine. So I asked them the terminology, they said hematuria. No history of trauma, because trauma here only if there is hematuria, yes. Then ultrasonography findings are given, prostate is enlarged. Now they came to know that the pathology is in the prostate and not the bladder. And what did the urologist do? So he has done a procedure, and Dr. Vidya has given you all what the procedure which was done also, transurethral resection of prostate. And all these are sent to us, they'll all be in bits and pieces. So we don't see an intact prostate there. Okay, so microscopy. So this is the microscopy. So lot of glands are there. Glands are proliferated. And the stroma in between is slightly less also. At places it is more. But microscopy has shown proliferation of both the glands and fibromuscular stroma. So fibromuscular stroma, what does it contain? It contains smooth muscles, okay, that they should know. So proliferation of these glands is, what answer did they give?
They gave it as hyperplasia. There is hyperplasia of the glandular tissue. Glands are increased in number.
Glands number is increased. So even fibromuscular hyperplasia. So the correct answer was
prostatic hyperplasia.
Yeah, benign prostatic hyperplasia. So etiology we didn't ask them, I think. This is hormone related. Yes. Then how is the above condition different from hypertrophy and neoplasm? Yes.
So here, since we know that this is a case of hyperplasia, it becomes important to even differentiate with the other terminologies like hypertrophy and neoplasia. So in hypertrophy, we see that the size of the cells are increased. The number is not increased. There is hypertrophy. Then it is called as hypertrophy. But when we are talking about hyperplasia, we mean to say that the number of the cells are increased. That is the basic difference between hyperplasia and hypertrophy that we should differentiate. Then when we are talking about the term neoplasia, here though there is increase in the number of cells and all, but here it is an uncontrolled procedure, process where there's proliferation of the cells which is uncontrolled.
Correct.
So that is
students had the textbook with them, and so nicely they defined neoplasia. They said uncontrolled proliferation of the cells even after cessation of the stimulus. So they were good. So a new terminology of neoplasia was introduced here to them. Yes. So this was benign prostatic hyperplasia. This is an intact prostate. Now earlier days, this was a surgery which was done, prostatectomy. So cut section showing nodular hyperplasia. See nodules which are protruding, which are standing out prominently. All this is because of the glandular and the fibromuscular hyperplasia that is seen. Yes, hormonal related. This was the second case. Yes.
So here the case here is of a 24-year-old female who presented with PPH, that is postpartum hemorrhage. So she had to undergo hysterectomy. Now we received the hysterectomy specimen that is shown in the picture. Okay, I have given a normal as well as the specimen that we have received. So on gross examination, the uterus is enlarged and the wall is thickened. So since it is a postpartum case, so we call it also as a gravid uterus. On microscopy, it was found that the thickness of the myometrium is increased. That is, there is increase in the smooth muscle cells of the myometrium. Now, the number of smooth muscle cells are increased both in the number as well as in the size. So, what is this condition? Whether is it physiological or pathological?
Very, very easy and nice question. See, the question here is a 24-year-old female, okay, postpartum hemorrhage. So why did they do this hysterectomy? You know, students may wonder why this. So there is a raw area here and hemorrhagic, you know, dark area. Probably this was ruptured uterus. So definitely hysterectomy has to be done. Okay. On gross examination, the uterus is enlarged because it is just, you know, after delivery, postpartum. So we do not see the fetus inside. This is following delivery. So involution of the uterus, for uterus to go back to its original size takes minimum of 6 weeks. So this is still under the influence of hormones, the size is increased. And Dr. Vidya has very nicely said that microscopic examination. So this is the normal uterus and this is the uterus microscopy from a gravid uterus. That is same case, you may say, postpartum hemorrhage. See the number of cells, they've increased, smooth muscle. So this is hyperplasia and the size also. This is cross section and this is longitudinal. Okay, so if we show you longitudinal section of this also, then you can probably make out. So there is both hyperplasia and hypertrophy of this. Student said that.
Yes,
when it came to gravid, and they all knew it was physiological, not pathological. So the changes, this particular case scenario teaches them both about hyperplasia and hypertrophy. Yes.
And I gave this case because I wanted them to know the terminology of like the cause-related hyperplasia, physiological causes as well as pathological causes. So this is a case of an example of physiological hyperplasia.
Yeah, this is physiological. Yes. Next case.
So the next case is a 40-year female presented with abnormal uterine bleeding since 6 months. When ultrasonography was done, it was found that there is increase in the endometrial thickness. So she was subjected to endometrial biopsy. So when the specimen was received, the microscopy showed there is proliferation of both glands and stroma. Glands are multi-layered, crowded in arrangement, and again there is increase in the gland to stroma ratio, indicating that the number of glands are increased. What is the condition? Mention the types of this cellular adaptation.
Yeah. So 40-year-old woman, so we can still say reproductive age group.
Yes.
She has come with abnormal uterine bleeding. So probably to tell them precisely, let us say she has come with menorrhagia.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
We may even say history of passing clots. Okay, that is excessive bleeding since 6 months. Okay. So gynecological examination is done and she is sent for ultrasonography, and ultrasonography reveals gynecologist has seen this as a bulky uterus.
Yes,
uterine size is increased. But now what is the cause for increase in uterine size? In the previous case she discussed, you knew that uterine size was increased because of myometrial hypertrophy, hyperplasia. So let us see what is the cause here. So ultrasonography has revealed endometrial thickness, increase in the endometrial thickness. Okay, so endometrial curettage or biopsy was done. So microscopy, there is a picture that is given for comparison. So this is proliferative phase of the endometrium. We are seeing glands and the stroma. It's early proliferative. So all the glands are tubular. So when they are cut across, we are seeing them of uniform size. They are round to oval. So not much of variation, no variation at all in size of this. Almost all are same, and stroma is also more here. So compared to this, the glands are increased in number. And see, when the glands, the number increases, the stroma comes down. See here. And at places further away, stroma was also more. And looking at the lining, here there is only one layer of cells, columnar cells. But here they can look at the nuclei. See, number of nuclei, there's so many. That means each cell having one nuclei. This is multi-layered. So real hyperplasia. Increased number of glands, the line by hyperplastic cells. So there is proliferation of the cells that are lining the endometrial glands. Yeah, what was the answer that they gave?
They answered it as endometrial hyperplasia.
Yeah. So hyperplasia. And because it is endometrial hyperplasia. Mention the types of cellular adaptation. So the condition itself is telling them it is hyperplasia. Hyperplasia is the cellular adaptation. And again, just like prostatic hyperplasia, so even this is dependent on the estrogen hormone. So this was estrogen related hyperestrogenic state causing
Hyperplasia.
endometrial hyperplasia. So you will be taught about endometrial hyperplasia in detail later. This is only to introduce you to the terminologies based on case scenarios. Next case.
So this is a case of 16-year-old female who presented with small, fleshy, painless growths over the right hand fingers, as you can see in the picture. They are rough to touch. Skin biopsy, excision biopsy was done. And the microscopy showed that there is increase, as you can see in the picture, there is increase in the epidermal thickness. There is proliferation of the epidermis. So again, what is this condition? Mention the different causes for the cellular adaptation.
Yeah, so there's so much for them to learn from this case. Okay, when I asked them, some of the students even directly said they were.
Yes.
So they knew about
they could identify the
clinical
lesions.
lesions. So what? You should be careful when you see at least patients, people, not only those who come to the hospital, we call them as patients. Okay, so anybody with this, please bring them to the hospital and give them the proper treatment. Okay, now they're doing very nice cautery and all that. Otherwise, it's so infectious. It just spreads. I just want to tell a case here. We had a priest in our temple who had these warts. Okay. I was so scared, the viral particles which are there. So he would be transmitting it and all that, washing the idols and doing puja and all that. So I brought him here and he was treated very well by, I think, Dr. Manjunath. He's fine. So the condition, they said, is wart. So when we asked them the etiology, they said virus.
That's
okay. Yeah. So HPV, we need to teach them about HPV and different strains and prevention of cervical cancer due to these strains. So skin excision biopsy, nowadays if they're small, they usually do cautery and then they don't send the specimen at all. This is a nice microscopic appearance. So what do they see here? See, normal skin, do you remember? Just see the adjacent skin which is here. This is the adjacent skin. That is skin which is here by the side of the lesion. So in the lesion has come above the skin. That means there is something that is growing. So growing is proliferation. So that is hyperplasia. So the skin thickness is increased. So as the thickness is increasing, the skin is growing outwards. This is a papillary hyperplasia. So the terminology here we use is acanthosis. If they say hyperplasia of the skin, that is enough, I think. There is more keratin, and these are the granular cells which have also increased, hypergranulosis. So this case you have given them for them to identify this as hyperplasia. So the cellular adaptation, they had mentioned it was
viral etiology cause for this I had asked one. So they answered it as the viral infection. So they have answered it as
yes, there are so many causes for this, papillosquamous lesions or hyperplasia of the skin. So they enjoyed, learning about this case. So next case, I like this case, Srividya.
Thank you.
This was nice.
This is a case of 32-year female who presented with complaints of breathlessness and weakness since 3 months. Blood investigations were done and it showed that the hemoglobin percentage was reduced, that is around 6 gram percentage. And also the peripheral smear showed features of hemolysis. So
Yeah.
the next,
So 32-year-old female presenting with complaints of breathlessness. So many causes for breathlessness and weakness. So one thing everybody does, students should remember, is anemia. Because we tell them, according to WHO, more than 57%, up to 70%, women and children suffer from anemia in our country. Yeah. So here, breathlessness and weakness for this patient was because of anemia. Just 6 grams. Okay. So then you said we have to know the cause for anemia. So blood smear examination showed hemolysis. Okay. So hemolysis, RBCs are being destroyed. So this is hemolytic anemia. Yes.
now next the bone marrow was done. Bone marrow examination revealed that there's increase in the red cell progenitors. That is, the erythroid cells are increased. There's proliferation of erythroid cells. So in turn, there is increase in the erythroid myeloid ratio.
Very nice. So bone marrow examination may not be done for hemolytic anemia
May not
cases,
be done.
but before that probably bone marrow, or usually we may say bone marrow in such cases reveal erythroid
Erythroid
hyperplasia. Erythroid cell proliferation. So erythroid cells proliferation, the students were so quick, now they know whenever we are telling them cell proliferation, they said erythroid hyperplasia.
They were very quick in picking up the answer. I didn't expect that, but they were very smart enough. They picked up the thing.
Yeah, they've understood. They've understood
the
what is the pathogenesis. Yeah. And increased erythroid myeloids. But we had to tell them the 3 lineages: erythroid, myeloid, and megakaryopoiesis. Erythropoiesis, myelopoiesis, and megakaryopoiesis. So they answered this as erythroid hyperplasia. Yes. The answer was very good from them. Yeah.
Is this condition reversible or irreversible? So here, because they had understood the mechanism here, they were very smart and they gave me the exact answer.
Yeah, because physiology they have
know
learned.
the physiology.
Yeah, when we
And
ask
they have
them what
applied
is
it
the
also here, ma'am. Very well, they have applied here. So because of there is increased demand, there is increased production of erythropoietin, which is stimulating the bone marrow cells, especially the erythroid cells, causing the hyperplasia. So once it is corrected, so it becomes a reversible condition. So they have understood the concept very nicely and they have applied for all the cases. So they gave me all the correct answers, whatever I was expecting from them.
Very nice. So this is a bone marrow aspiration that is stained with the Romanowski stain, Leishman stain, or Giemsa. So these are the fat cells. So they are appearing less. So cells are more, and all these are the erythroid precursors. So these are the cells which have undergone hyperplasia. Yeah, with PGs we would have discussed more and more, but that is enough for our, undergraduates to understand what is the pathology, pathogenesis. That's it. Yeah. So we have discussed cases that were contributed by Dr. Vidya. So I thank again all my faculty who contributed for this case-based scenarios. We started with Dr. Meenakshi, then Dr. Disha, Dr. Neeta, Dr. Balaji, and Dr. Srividya.
It was very nice, ma'am. Thanks for the opportunity. We could also participate with the interaction and as well as the present here. It was very nice.